Hi, my name is Alex Willams, founder of the New Stack, and you are listening to the New Stack Analysts podcast. Each week, we look at application development and management at scale. Are you looking for a platform as a service? You might want to check out OpenShift. OpenShift is Red Hat's platform as a service that allows developers to quickly develop, host, and scale applications in a cloud environment. With OpenShift, you have a choice of offerings, including online, on-premises, and open source project options. Check out OpenShift at openshift.com. Now let's get to the show. Hi, Alex Willams of the New Stack here for the last minutes of KubeCon, the first event for the Kubernetes community here in San Francisco at the Palace Hotel. And I'm here with two people from Red Hat and Patrick Reilley, the organizer of the event, who is also the founder and CEO of Kismatic. We have Grant Shipley and Martin Klaus. Grant, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Martin, maybe you can tell us about Red Hat and your involvement in the Kubernetes community.
Sure. So my name is Grant Shipley. I do work on the OpenShift team at Red Hat, and I've been on the team since day one, so basically about almost 5 years ago. So I've seen platform as a service and container application platforms, evolve over that time and into what they are today.
Martin?
Yeah, this is Martin Klaus. I'm Senior Director of Product Marketing for OpenShift at Red Hat. And thanks to Patrick and Joe for organizing the first conference for Kubernetes. We thought it would be a great venue to launch a new offering, OpenShift 3.1, at the conference, since we're supporting Kubernetes and it's part of the OpenShift offering. So I think from our perspective, it's a great event, lots of interest, lots of discussion, lots of debate. And I look forward to having more of these, in the future.
So, Patrick, tell us about the event. How many people were here? How many sponsors? And from my observation, this is a first event. This is a pretty significant number of people here, and a number of supporters.
Yeah, so we had over 500 attendees, over 30 sponsors. It really does not feel like an inaugural event to me. We had the folks from the Linux Foundation, helping out with everything, and they did a great job. It just went well. I was very, very pleased.
So the theme for this show really is about the observations that came from OpenStack. Perhaps, Martin, you can share some of your thoughts about the Kubernetes community and how you view it, right now. I mean, we've seen really the evolution of the Docker and container ecosystem. You have the dev and test world, and then you have the production world, right? And we're starting to see those formulate really for the first time. What about that maturity do you recognize in this event, and what are some of your observations about it?
Yeah, I think we've seen that we're early on, and it was interesting yesterday when Keith actually asked anybody to stand up who was using Kubernetes production and to get a stage, and it was really interesting because I think there was maybe 10, 15 people on the stage to take the photo with him. And so that tells me that we're still early on. There's a lot of interest, a lot of excitement. People are trying to figure out what they can do with the technology. They're trying to figure out how does it fit in. They're trying to figure out how to best use it and what are all the use cases that Kubernetes can enable. So I think this is a really good and healthy sign of a lot of momentum and interest. And I think it's going to only take off from here. And also our interactions with some of the other vendors was very interesting. All the people trying to figure out how we do monitoring, how do we do production-wide deployments, how we do cross-cloud federation. So a lot of topics that are coming out of this conference here, I think that people are thinking about and trying to solve those problems.
So, Patrick, you talked to all the sponsors. I expect you able to define the agenda. What were some of the topics that you wanted to have addressed here at KubeCon?
Well, I think the big thing for us was to make sure that it's community focused and not sponsor driven. And we wanted people talking about real world problems that they solved with Kubernetes and be really honest about the state of the project and what they're looking for it to solve, in the coming months, coming years. And I think we had a good mix of talks that led to that.
So tell us then some of the observations you take away about the state of the project right now.
I would say for the age of the project, it has kind of an unprecedented sense of maturity. I mean, I look at the closest competitor in a lot of ways as Apache Mesos, and even though they have an operational head start, like the delta between what Mesos can do today and what Kubernetes can do today is not, as big as you would expect.
The delta, the difference is not that much.
I mean, there's still definitely differences, but I look at the velocity of the Kubernetes project and the number of attendees here that are dedicated their time to be here. Like, I'm excited what the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months holds, for the project.
So Grant, let me ask you this question then. Over the next 6 to 12 months, what will be some of the focus that you will put on and what you'll be looking for from the community to improve the project and to make those differences? I don't want to compare it directly to Kubernetes, but just in terms of the relativity to other orchestration platforms.
Yeah, so I think what's most important for our orchestration platform and for containers in general that Kubernetes is scheduling and placing out on the infrastructure is making that very user-friendly for both developers and operations. So the people that I see right now really involved in Kubernetes and even deploying Docker containers are kind of the rockstar style developers, and it's more making that accessible to the vast majority of developers out there who may be running on the Windows operating system, for example, in their corporate job. And so we want to see a lot of work around just the developer workflows and the developer experience to hide some of the complexity that exists right now in the project to make it more accessible.
Okay, so Martin, when you're looking, at the OpenShift platform right now, and we're at 3.1, isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And you just launched that. You're seeing this community start to develop. What will be some of the emphasis you'll put on the platform to continue to help it evolve? What are some of the observations that you saw at this conference that you think will be things you'll be thinking about when you're doing that new development?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two things here. One is activities that happen in the upstream community, and then what are the things that we're going to do downstream as part of a commercial offering, right? To Grant's point earlier, I think there's a lot of early adopters of technology. People like to tinker and play with technology, try to figure out what they can do with it, what interesting problems can solve with it. That's certainly one sort of folks in the community. But then as you then sort of go into production deployments, a lot of enterprise organizations looking for stable, mature, tested, scalable, offerings that they can run the business on. So I think those are the two efforts that I think we definitely see and we want to focus on. And so what that also means is that we need to have the flexibility to drive innovation faster from upstream communities down into production quality offerings, so that the more customers and users can take advantage of it. Obviously, Patrick and Grant can speak to some of the more detailed technology focus areas, but from a production standpoint, I would say, let's make sure that we sort of nurture the community and contribute and nurture those ideas that are coming out and see, what are the business problems we can solve and address with it. But then also how do we, drive that innovation down into sort of commercial offerings that would benefit the broader market as well.
So particular kind of issues. You hear a lot about schedulers, and there's a lot of different scheduling technologies out there. Grant, what are some of your observations about the schedulers and discussions about schedulers that you're hearing here at the show?
Yeah, I think it's what's unique about the Kubernetes project right now is just the pure excitement around it. This is the first event, and you had over 500 people show up and attend, which is pretty phenomenal. And Kubernetes, I think we're all very lucky to be part of this project, this state in the game. I follow a lot of Linux mailing lists, and oddly enough, today I saw a couple of job postings come across looking specifically for Docker and Kubernetes. I haven't seen that before yet. And so I think people are coming around to the notion of the benefits of running Kubernetes and a scheduler orchestration tier on top of containers when you're done playing with containers, right? And you really want to start using them in production. You're going to need one of these systems. And, obviously we prefer Kubernetes at Red Hat and specifically on the OpenShift team. And we are the second largest contributor code-wise to the upstream project.
But what about this? I was asking specifically about the schedulers.
You mean like between
the scheduling
Mesos?
The difference between Mesos and Kubernetes, but, and what the observations are about, what does need to be improved and changed.
So I think from my standpoint, I like the approach that the Kubernetes team took to scheduling. They made sure that from the beginning it was pluggable and extensible, but they didn't try to solve anything other than the basic use case. So the scheduler that we have now, for all intents and purposes, is just a round robin. It's just going to do the simplest implementation possible. The next generation scheduler that's in the works is more of a least used. So we can start getting metrics from the hosts and decide, where the spread should go and how things could be. But where I'm excited about this path is it allows people to come in and do very exciting things and use that extensibility. You look at the Univa folks that are here at the conference. They inherited the SunGrid technology, and now they're able to use some of that technology and build a better scheduler on top of the generic scheduler on Kubernetes and provide value. You look at Multi Swarscoff, the person that was principal author of the Omega white paper for Google. He's working on the Poseidon scheduler, which is using his Firmament flow-based scheduler. And they're able to just easily work with the Kubernetes framework and build on top of it, and they aren't being impacted and looking for new primitives. Like, they're already there. They have the building blocks they need to do what they need to do.
What is it meant by least used scheduler then?
So you think about each of the nodes in the Kubernetes cluster. It can be, it can see that, like, oh, this sixth node I haven't used much, so I'm going to go ahead and prioritize putting load on that node.
Now let's take a quick break before we get back to the second half of the show. If you're thinking about a platform as a service, you might check out OpenShift. OpenShift is Red Hat's platform as a service. It allows developers to quickly develop, host, and scale applications in a cloud environment. With OpenShift, you have a choice of offerings including online, on-premises, and open source project options. You should check out OpenShift at openshift.com. Now let's get back to the show. So in terms of other aspects of the Kubernetes environment, what were some of the more interesting sessions that you heard, Martin, from when you were able to get into some of the keynotes? And what were some of the observations that you have from some of those?
I thought the panel was really good today. The panel that had representatives from Engineer, from Google, from Red Hat, obviously, from Apsera, and how it talked about some of the trends going forward and what it means in terms of platformization and sort of helping the adoption of platform as a service. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations that I picked up on where people say, how do we help write the least amount of code? How do we help developers make it easy for them to drive new applications and make it really interesting for them to sort of innovate? Because at the end of the day, developers are instantly creative people, and so that's the platform can sort of take on a lot of the heavy lifting that people don't really want to do anyways. And so I think that's been one key takeaway for me, at least, that there's a lot more intelligence moves into the platform. It makes it easier for developers then to differentiate on top of that with some of their innovation that they're working on.
Any sessions that you recall that were of particular interest?
What was most surprising to me, and I don't want to call out a single session, but just the overall theme from a lot of the sessions, were all of these great tools being created for the Kubernetes ecosystem. And I even had people, talking to me in the hall, small startups, like 3 and 4 people who's creating these tools around Kubernetes to make it more accessible to people.
What were some of the tools that people were talking about?
Yeah, so the one that I really enjoyed was a small startup here in the Valley. So they had a set of command line tools that will allow you to version containers, roll back containers, deploy them out automatically, basically just for the developer workflow. They weren't focused so much on production, but just to make it accessible for developers, and I thought that was pretty cool stuff. I also enjoyed a lot of the sessions from, quite frankly, some of our competitors, Red Hat, OpenShift competitors, to see some of the cool stuff they're doing in the Kubernetes space and all these new, I don't want to say platform as a service, because I actually think we've progressed beyond that just a little bit with Docker and Kubernetes now. But some of our major competitors, the stuff they've been working on was pretty cool as well, like package management systems and things like that was quite interesting to me.
Considering that, we're here, at this event, it's just finishing up, Patrick, and, we talk a lot about the people who are just learning how to use the platform, just so they're getting introduced to it. What about those power users out there? There are some, they are starting to grow. What are they talking about?
To me, it's exciting to look at companies like Lithium that were able to get to production services up on Kubernetes and feel comfortable, running in production there. And you look at where the project had fallen short for them on that journey and what they needed to add, what they needed to learn, what they needed to push back on the project for to get them sooner. I think we're kind of on the cusp of seeing the project really figure out how we're going to do persistent storage, how we're going to solve these base needs that they have, and then looking forward past Kubernetes, like the Kubernetes closing keynote yesterday was really exciting. For me, looking at like multi-availability zone, class cluster, like when we have all of these things in existence, it's going to be very compelling technology. And not to throw in a plug for Red Hat, but it is exciting to me that we have companies that have been in for the long haul, that really understand kernel development, like embracing this technology and being the second best contributor to it, by lines of code. Like it's neat that I can go to customers and say, you know what, talk to these guys, buy this product. They're keeping their finger on the pulse. It's an easy sell for us.
Standardization and the standardization of customers' environments. How do we see that being achieved over the next 6 to 12 months? Because that's a big deal, right? To have that common infrastructure.
Well, I think choice is really important. People need to be able to have that pluggable infrastructure where, like, today this scheduler makes sense, but tomorrow this other one makes sense, or in this context this makes sense. And to, like, Craig McLucky today on the panel made what I thought was a really astute observation, that a lot of enterprises don't want a ton of choice when it comes to the developer workflow. And that's where I see things like OpenShift being really exciting. Like you say, like, this is the way you set it up, and this is the pipeline you're going to go through, and we're going to guarantee that things work step to step. I think when we have the foundation piece in play, it gives a way that we have a sounding board and rules and, like, ways that everyone can be, be it that 3-person startup that Grant mentioned earlier, or a 10,000 person startup, everyone kind of has equal weight in the discussion, and at least the way that they'll be heard and empowered. So
Martin, perhaps you can just share a little bit with us about 3.1. Can you tell us about what you were hoping to achieve with 3.1 and what it has and what we can look forward to going forward?
Yeah, so I think with OpenShift 3.1, we really wanted to follow up on a few things that we've started to work on with OpenShift 3.0, which was sort of the first major release that introduced the Docker and Kubernetes type formats in the platform. The one thing that we hear loud and clear from the Red Hat customer base is that while they're investing in cloud or container-based applications and technologies, they also want to bridge back to their traditional existing applications. So this is not like an either-or. They're looking to sort of, they make the investment forward, but they also always worry in the back of their minds at least, so how does this integrate with the infrastructure and applications that we have? So we've tried to really focus on sort of establishing one platform that allows you to run both stateful and stateless applications, both traditional J2EE based applications as well as container-based applications. So that was an important sort of area for us. We've also looked at the overall developer experience and what we can do to streamline that, giving developers more choice in terms of the development tools they're using, integrations with CI/CD, accelerating some of the build cycles and times to get from code checking down into sort of deployment cycles, with Jenkins and so forth. We've also looked at, from an operations, so this is the ops piece in DevOps, what we can do to make it easier from an infrastructure admin standpoint to make it easier to manage resources. Many customers use OpenShift and or container-based applications on top of VM-based infrastructure. So what are the resource requirements that container-based workloads have on the underlying server compute, networking resources? And so we've completely integrated CloudForms, which is the Red Hat management portfolio for the infrastructure, into OpenShift as well. And the last piece is sort of broadening the ecosystem. And so we have a lot of partners now that are offering integrations and extensions on the marketplace. And going back to what Patrick said earlier about standardization and APIs that allow other partners to participate and really that enable choice. We've seen a lot of Red Hat partners now offering sort of pluggable modules that enhance, for example, the storage technology, or that enhance the networking sort of modules, or that sit on top of the platform and provide extensions from a load testing standpoint, as an example, right? So I think those are really the four areas in terms of the platform, the developer experience, the infrastructure management, as well as the the ecosystem that sort of extends and gives customers choice really in a lot of different ways.
So, Grant, anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a developer at heart, right? And so to me, the best things that we've added in the most recent version of the OpenShift product line and upstream project is the performance improvements we made on a open source project that we have called Source to Image. And I think that's critical, a critical project for developers, your average everyday developers, because with the Source to Image project, we can take an existing source code repository that doesn't have any Docker metadata, so no Docker file, and we can create a Docker image on the fly based off of that source code after it's built. And so we did a lot of work around improving the performance of that to really make the Kubernetes orchestration engine and Docker containers by themselves more accessible to developers. We also added some great features for both developers and admins, in that you can get aggregated logs right inside the web console via WebSocket stream-based implementation. You can also exec a shell inside of your pods if you have a container running inside of a pod right from inside the web console as well. So a lot of great features for both developers and operations staff that I'm pretty excited about.
Well, great. So to wrap up, Patrick, what's next? What's next for the KubeCon? Is this going to be an annual event? You're going to bring it to other places? There's such a growing community here. You can't just have one event once a year.
Yeah, so the idea here is to actually, since Google has given all of the intellectual property and naming of Kubernetes to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, that we would also give KubeCon to the foundation. And the folks at Linux Foundation are going to continue the event forward. So we're hoping that we will do KubeCon EU, possibly something in Asia Pacific, and have the cadence be at least there's an event every 3 to 6 months, happening somewhere in the world, kind of moving the community forward.
Martin, that seems to make sense, doesn't it?
That seems to make sense?
That seems to make sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think we need to actually have more frequent conversations, and I think the conference this week showed that we need to have more of these opportunities for vendors as well as customers, developers to come together and have that sort of debate and exchange of ideas. I think we need definitely more of it, and I think there's many great examples in computer science really that sort of demonstrate how we can do it.
I mean, as Grant mentioned earlier, being a developer at heart myself, one of the things I found really interesting at the conference is that we had Brian Grant and some of the core team of Kubernetes in a room, and we jokingly said come here in person to sit down and get your pull request shot down, or accepted. But it was a chance to actually meet in physically with the people, and you don't get the chance to go up to Clayton much and say, hey, is this the way you want this done? It's exciting.
It's a nice sign of an early community that you can do that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about sums up the event for KubeCon 2015. Again, Patrick, congratulations. Martin, thanks for taking some time to talk with us. And Grant, nice to meet you and have you here on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
That's it for this week's show. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsor, If you're thinking about a platform as a service, you might check out OpenShift. OpenShift is Red Hat's platform as a service. It allows developers to quickly develop, host, and scale applications in a cloud environment. With OpenShift, you have a choice of offerings including online, on-premises, and open source project options. You should check out OpenShift at openshift.com. Audio editing and sound design for the new Stack Analyst podcast is provided by Broken Hours. You can find them at brokenhours.com. Thanks again, and hope to see you back at the show. Bye-bye.